What is going on, guys? It is me, DevilNeverCry, and today's video is going to be focused on Nell Goldstein. Now, for those of you who don't know, she is a prominent character in the Devil May Cry 1 novel, a novel that came out around the time of DMC1's release and covers the events that lead up to Devil May Cry 1. Now, obviously some things have been retconned considering DMC3's existence that tell the tale of Dante's youth in a different way. But with the inclusion of Nell Goldstein's granddaughter Nico, that in turn must make Nell Goldstein herself somewhat canon. So today's video is going to be about who she is, what she did, and what her significance in this series is, and why that may be important for Nico and Dante's relationship in DMC5. So to start off, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background on what is happening in the DMC1 novel when Nell herself is introduced. So Dante's been working in an unnamed city under the alias of Tony Redgrave for the past 2 years. He's essentially rolled in, done whatever he wants, considering nobody can stand up as a challenge to him. So this means the local underworld in terms of crime, and by that I mean like the local drug rings, the mob, the mafia. The denizens of the underworld, you might say, have essentially crumbled and withered away, considering nothing they do can basically put a stop to Dante's antics. At this point, all that Dante uses as a weapon is Woozy, or its formal name in the video games is the Force Edge, weapon left behind by Sparta, and whatever firearms he can get his hands on. Enter Nell Goldstein. So Nell is essentially a master weapons maker and crafter, known as the .45 caliber artist because of her skill and proficiency when it comes to those firearms. Now the novel describes her as a little bit past her prime, so these days she spends most of her days tinkering with and crafting new Frankenstein weapons out of an amalgamation of different parts. She's supposedly a lady who likes to pick her clientele, with the novel stating that money plays no part with how she actually picks her clientele. Basically means she'll only sell to you if she finds you interesting or not. Now, of course, Dante at this point is pretty reckless with his firearms, sees them as disposable, and due to the fact that he attempts to fire them like machine guns, he tends to wear them out and pretty much destroy them after 1 or 2 uses. This means that he's actually a regular at Nell's shop, with the two having developed some sort of mutual friendship. Of course, Dante brings in a lot of work and money for her, but then at the same time, he also brings in a lot of hassle. He often requests a lot of ridiculous jobs from her, and what she does end up making for him, he often just decides to break, regardless of all the warnings that he's been given from her about being careful. Despite this, Nell still likes Dante. Now, this may also be partly due to the fact that she resembles her young son quite a bit. So after Nell is introduced in the DMC1 novel, a lot of time passes before we see her yet again mentioned in the middle of the book. Dante goes in, routinely obviously, to come and pick up whatever ridiculous job that he asked from Nell. I believe he asked her to modify a bunch of Mauser pistols from him that he had recently acquired and given to her for her to tinker with. Now, whilst handing over what Dante had requested, she decides to give him a warning about Gilver. Now, I won't delve too much into Gilver at this point, but let's just say that he is another demon hunter / mercenary that at this point has teamed up with Dante. Now decides to warn Dante about the fact that Gilver merely killed a man just for attempting to uncover his identity, telling Dante that he's a dangerous man and that he should probably watch his back. Of course, Dante at this point pays no attention to her, thinks she's merely overreacting and that Gilver's perfectly fine, which, spoiler alert, he turns out to be insane. And then Gilver himself decides to visit the shop. The book makes a note of mentioning that Nell, even having seen all sorts of unsavory characters, has chills running down her spine when she finally meets Gilver, a man who's so cool, calm, and eerily collected. He seems to give off vibes that make her skin crawl. Now, Gilver being Gilver, he doesn't take no for an answer when Nell attempts to refuse to sell him any weapons. He merely throws down a bunch of cash, yanks a weapon right off the wall, and then when being asked about what the weapon is actually for, he alludes to killing Dante. And as if that wasn't bad enough, when he goes to leave the shop, Nell makes note of his curious shadow. It looks nothing like a man clad in bandages wearing a simple suit, but instead seems to represent a giant demonic being clad in armor. And for those who don't make the connection at this point, that shadow does represent Nilo Angelo, because Gilver is indeed Virgil before the events of DMC1 and before we see him as Nilo Angelo. So at this point it sort of alludes that he's already been corrupted in some way. Now the next time we see Nell Goldstein is unfortunately the last. Again, a large amount of time has passed since Dante and her have met, and when Dante's on his way to his local dive to meet Enzo and all the other sort of middlemen who provide him jobs, an explosion occurs that is in a part of town that he's very, very familiar with. Sensing that it's Nell's store that exploded, he decides to sprint over as fast as he can, only to see the shop in flames. Now at this point, he bursts in to save Nell, but at this point she's just happily tinkering away with some sort of new project. And despite Dante's warnings about a fire and the need to get out, she simply ignores him and continues tinkering. Now she's actually working on ebony and ivory at this point, and asks Dante to come over and help her so that he can put the finishing touches on his own keepsake weapons. Dante states that her calm and collected manner soothes him, despite the fact that there's a blazing inferno around them. She makes Dante put the finishing touches on ebony and ivory, as well as makes him assemble the weapons himself. And when he's finally done putting it all together and familiarizing himself quickly with the weapons, that's when he makes a note of the large gaping wound on Nell's back. Dante is amazed at the fact that she's standing up on nothing but willpower, and states that any normal human would have easily succumbed to their wounds at this point, especially considering Nell's an old woman. However, the adrenaline of putting together ebony and ivory is rather short-lived, as Nell succumbs to her wounds and collapses in Dante's arms. She slowly fades away in Dante's arms and dies, but not before referring to him as her son, mainly because she's delirious at this point because of all the blood loss and because of the lack of oxygen because of the blazing inferno. At this point, Dante's barely keeping it together because he starts to see the resemblance between Nell's death and his own mother's death. The book states that it's as if the past and the present had seamlessly blended together, with Dante not being able to tell the difference. Regardless to say, yet again, somebody Dante deeply cares about dies in his arms with him not being able to do a single thing. And with Nell's death, Dante decides to stop messing around, and he finally decides to shed the Tony Redgrave alias, stating that after his mother's death he sort of had hid himself away, but now he was done running and hiding. Dante then goes on to take down an entire squadron of demons that had hid themselves in the flames that licked at Nell's apartment. He does so with a wild volley of bullets from ebony and ivory, freshly crafted, before emerging from the scenario a changed man. And if we take a look at this page here, it states, "The confusion had left him, no emotion, no tears, no childhood mischief." And with that, we see Dante drop his youthful DMC3-like persona, along with the Tony Redgrave moniker. He's now more cool, calm and collected, though we do see flashes of Tony come out every now and then whenever he cracks a wise joke. Now you may be wondering why exactly I'm talking about Dante, considering this is a video about Nell. We have to realize and understand that Nell had a big impact on making Dante who he is. Now we barely see a mention of Nell in any of the video games, other than the fact that Ebony and Ivory have the 45 Artworks caliber inscription on them. But now that Nell is fully acknowledged, with Nico being her granddaughter in DMC5, we have to think about Nico and Dante's relationship. Did Dante know that Nico's son likely had a child? Does he know of Nico's existence, who she is, what she's capable of? Was he the one that put Nero in touch with Nico after he lost his arm? Does Nico bear some sort of grudge against Dante because he's the sole reason Nell died? Gilver sent those minions over to Nell to mess with Dante, and to finally get him to start being serious. Or maybe Nico holds a grudge against Virgil. If the whole Gilver being Virgil thing hasn't been retconned, then Nico has a serious bone to pick with Virgil, considering he's the one that got Nell killed, regardless of the fact that he was corrupted. And because Nell played such a large part in making Dante who he is, maybe Nico's role in this game is going to be quite large. Maybe it's going to be larger than we even expected, but who knows. With Gamescom being so close, maybe we won't have to wait long to see what sort of role Nico will play in DMC5, because I'm betting it's going to be a bigger one than we think it is. Let me know what you guys think down below, because talking about theories with you guys is always interesting. And with that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, especially if you managed to stick through this all and go right to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you guys for watching.